Hey everyone, it's Alex the Real Mr. Robinson, and this is my spoiler review for Godzilla King of the Monsters. I did have the chance to see the movie a second time, and with the second time seeing it, I feel pretty much the same as I did the first time. Although my opinions on certain elements have kinda, I won't say changed, but I definitely think more/less of them. In terms of all the monster action, it's a lot better than I remember. It's still too close up, and I wish there were more wide-angle shots, but the monster action's a lot better than I remember. The human stuff, on the other hand, is far worse than I remember. Now, I understand that this is not a movie you go to for the human stuff, and I get it. As someone who's been a Godzilla fan since he was 7 years old, I get it. But it's always a nice bonus when these elements are great as well. Like, look at the 1954 Godzilla, Ghidorah the three-headed monster, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. There might not be a lot, but there are some Godzilla movies that actually have good human characters. And with the characters in King of the Monsters, they are just a mixed bag for me, honestly. Most of the characters still have likable personalities, but they do make a lot of stupid decisions, especially when it comes to Vera Farmiga's character. You don't really get a clear understanding on why she wants to release the Titans, because at the beginning of the movie, it's established that her son is killed during the San Francisco attack in the 2014 movie. So she creates this device called the Orca, which is used to pretty much communicate with the other Titans and control them. Now, it's never established that she wanted to use them to wipe out the human race, or at the very least pull a Thanos and wipe out half the population, because they never make that clear. We don't know if she's pretty much blackmailed by Charles Dance's character, because she wants to try to protect her only kid now, Millie Bobby Brown. It's just really bizarre in terms of her motivation. And when it comes to releasing Ghidorah, even when I saw the 5-minute preview in front of Shazam, La Llorona, and Endgame, I could not understand for the life of me why anybody would release Ghidorah. That is just the dumbest thing imaginable. Now, one character that did annoy me watching this the second time around was Bradley Whitford. And normally, I love Bradley Whitford in stuff like Get Out, Saving Mr. Banks, Cabin in the Woods. Even in the Marvel one-shot, Agent Carter, he was really good, which is actually the first time I ever knew about this guy. But with this movie, it sounds like he can't deliver a single line of dialogue without sounding funny, and after a while, it just got pretty annoying pretty quickly. In my spoiler-free review, I mentioned that this movie wanted to try to cross the tones with the 2014 Godzilla and Kong Skull Island. I don't think it worked, and Bradley Whitford, for me, is proof of that. But enough about the human stuff. You want to hear me talk about all the stuff involving the monsters that I couldn't talk about beforehand. Now, in the 2014 movie, they finally did Godzilla justice here in the United States. And in this movie, with Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah, they are some of the best renditions of the character I've seen. With Rodan, there's not much to talk about except that he's a giant pteranodon, he came out of a volcano just like in Ghidorah the three-headed monster, and he's just awesome. And when it comes to Mothra, I love how Michael Dougherty acknowledged her roots and really established that Infant Island is a place in the Monsterverse. And when it comes to Zhang Ziyi's character, she is pretty much a nod to the Shobinji, or Mothra fairies. Because the first time we see Mothra hatch from her cocoon and become the adult Mothra, Zhang Ziyi's at the hatching site, and at first I thought, wait a minute, how did her character get from what is essentially the Monarch helicarrier to this site so quickly and back? And it wasn't until I saw the movie a second time where I'm like, oh, she's the twin. The character who's watching Mothra hatch from her cocoon is a different character than the one we've been following throughout most of the movie. But even if that was poorly conveyed on the first time seeing the movie, I love this aspect, and I love how Mothra is able to basically shoot webs in her adult form. When Mothra first appears in Boston to help Godzilla fight Ghidorah, she swoops in and webs two of Ghidorah's heads to the building just so Godzilla can tackle him. That's pretty neat, and that's a great use of teamwork right there. And it's also cool to see Mothra's adult form and Rodan together on screen for the first time. Because anytime these two monsters have ever been on screen, Mothra's always been in her larva form. And there's a funny moment when Mothra fights Rodan where she pretty much bitch slaps him. You can find it as a gif on Twitter. It's kind of hilarious, taken out of context. Now let's talk about this movie's version of Ghidorah, who is my favorite version of King Ghidorah. Sure, he's menacing, sure he's tough, sure he towers over Godzilla, and sure he meets all of the qualifications that the anime didn't meet, but more importantly, why he's my favorite version of Ghidorah is because, much like how Dougherty respected Mothra's origins, he respected the fact that Ghidorah is an alien. Since the MonsterVerse appears to be a more grounded series than some of the previous Godzilla films, I didn't think they would make Ghidorah an alien monster, but hey, they did. They established that he fell from the skies, was arch rivals with Godzilla for thousands of years, and that he's pretty much a false king. There's a point in the movie where Godzilla gets taken out. I'll get back to that a little later, because I have some issues with that moment. But anyway, Ghidorah basically crowns himself king and awakens all the other titans around the world, which are all original monsters, and have them go on rampages throughout the entire world. All except for Mothra, because in this series she's known as Queen of the Monsters and will not subject to Ghidorah. And Kong, because while Ghidorah pretty much calls for the mass awakening of all the other titans, Kong is just hanging out on Skull Island going, I don't give a f***, and then he just goes about his day. But the reason why Ghidorah eventually crowns himself king is because there's a point in the movie after Ghidorah takes out Rodan, Godzilla saves Monarch at the last minute, one of many last-minute saves from Godzilla, and rips off King Ghidorah's head, but the US Army sent a bomb to destroy Godzilla and Ghidorah, which basically houses the Oxygen Destroyer. And if you know the Oxygen Destroyer, it was the weapon that killed the original Godzilla, spawned Destoroyah, and pretty much has the ability to destroy all oxygen molecules within a 2-mile radius. Now, out of all the nods and references to the original Godzilla series, having the Oxygen Destroyer is the one that I have the most problems with, because A, it just came out of nowhere. It almost felt like Michael Dougherty pulled the Oxygen Destroyer out of his ass, and by actually using it as a weapon, you kind of miss the purpose of why the Oxygen Destroyer existed in the original Godzilla to begin with. Where Serizawa was scared of it falling into the wrong hands and becoming a weapon worse than the atomic bomb. And even if I didn't have a problem with all that, it doesn't do anything. Again, this is the weapon that killed the original Godzilla, and all it does is just weaken Godzilla and put him out of commission for the middle of the movie, whereas King Ghidorah is unaffected. I can give Ghidorah a pass because he's an alien and that technology might not work against him, but with Godzilla, he should have been dead right there. I mean, unless the series continues and they introduce Destoroyah, there's no reason for the Oxygen Destroyer to exist in this series. It just felt completely half-assed how they introduced it. But back to Ghidorah. He crowns himself king on top of the very volcano that Rodan emerged from, and since one of Ghidorah's heads just got ripped off by Godzilla, he has the ability to grow him back, which is a trait that we've never seen before, and that's pretty badass. Although I do have an issue with King Ghidorah being very terrible at trying to kill the main human characters, except for one. He successfully manages to eat Sally Hawkins during the first fight with Godzilla, which... it sucks that she's gone. She was one of my favorite characters in the last movie, and a little bit of this one. But when it comes to Millie Bobby Brown at the Red Sox Stadium in Boston, she is pretty quick to outrun his gravity beams, and I just wasn't impressed by that. Considering how huge King Ghidorah is, he should have had no problem just vaporizing her within that stadium, or even just like destroying it without using his gravity beams. And also, right before the first fight with Godzilla, Ghidorah is having a very difficult time destroying that Monarch helicopter. He's got 3 heads, and he towers over Godzilla. He should be able to gently nudge the helicopter with his head and crush it like a thumb pressing down on a bug. But no, he's having a difficult time, and I'm like, is that helicopter made out of vibranium? Because unless it is, there's no way King Ghidorah should be having this much trouble taking out a tiny helicopter. And once the actual fight takes place, that helicopter gets tossed all over the ground, but our human characters manage to walk out unscathed. So, I don't know. There's definitely a lot to complain about with this movie, and maybe those elements are nitpicks, but I do love the ending of the movie. The fight in Boston is pretty awesome, and even though all 4 monsters are in the same area, I do wish there was a more grander Royal Rumble. Having all 4 monsters on screen at the same time, like with Ghidorah the 3-headed monster, would have been awesome. But even then, it's still pretty cool. Mothra manages to knock out Rodan with a stinger, Mothra gets killed by Ghidorah, but her essence flows into Godzilla, pretty much powering him up to become Fire Godzilla, which is a nod to Burning Godzilla in Godzilla vs. Destoroyah. Except in this case, he's not dying, he's just gone Super Saiyan, as a lot of people like to say. And when Mothra's essence pretty much goes into Godzilla, that's a nice reference to GMK, where the same thing happened except switch Godzilla and Ghidorah's roles. But during that final moment, Godzilla's now able to shoot nuclear pulses, which if you really listen, you can hear Mothra's roar in those pulses. Dougherty does a really good job of hiding all the classic Toho sound effects in this movie. And the first pulse burns Ghidorah's wings away, Godzilla is completely immune to Ghidorah's gravity beams, and then the second pulse fries both the left and the right head, and Godzilla stomps on Ghidorah's chest. There's a huge explosion, and when the dust settles, Ghidorah's head is being eaten by Godzilla as he pretty much wins. And then all the other Titans show up, surround Godzilla, and Rodan comes in as well, who we thought was dead, but thankfully not. So Rodan eventually bows to Godzilla, and then all of the other Titans follow, and Godzilla roars in victory, officially declaring himself as King of the Monsters. And the very last shot of this movie, right before credits roll, is one of my favorite shots in the entire franchise. It might even rival some of the best shots in Shin Godzilla. It's that good. And then the credits are played to a really awesome cover of Blue Oyster Cult's Godzilla song, as we learn through news reels and articles that the Titans are more calm, Mothra is starting to be reborn, and Godzilla and the other Titans move to Skull Island. And the very last shot, right before it cuts to black and the rest of the credits, is a cave painting of Godzilla fighting Kong, which I think is an awesome setup for the next movie, which is going to be Godzilla vs. Kong. So from what we know, it seems like the big fight between these two monsters is pretty much going to be for dominance over Skull Island, and who is actually king. I'm sure it'll have some silly moments to it, but at the very least, this makes more sense than an advertising agency kidnapping Kong, as Godzilla just happens to break free of his iceberg at the same time. There is a stinger at the end of the movie, and I didn't think it was really much. Basically, one of Ghidorah's heads survived, and it's probably the one that Godzilla ripped off right before the oxygen destroyer bomb hit, and Charles Dance's character just comes in, looks at it, and says, "We'll take it." Because his character is just obsessed with buying Titan DNA, as they established early on. So if this series continues and they bring Ghidorah back, then I'm cool with it, because it's weird to have Godzilla's archenemy show up in the second movie and get killed in the same movie, because Ghidorah is not easy to take out. But my favorite moment in the entire movie honestly has to do with who this movie is dedicated to. The movie is dedicated to both Yoshimitsu Banno, who directed Godzilla vs. Ghidorah and is the executive producer of these new Godzilla movies, but it's also dedicated to Haruo Nakajima, and they show a still of him on the set of Ebirah Horror of the Deep, just smiling at the camera. And when I first saw this movie, the audience cheered. And it's really cool to see Nakajima get more recognition as the actor who played Godzilla for the first time. And there you go, that's my spoiler review for Godzilla King of the Monsters, and this will be the last Godzilla video you're going to be seeing from me for a while. It's not good enough to be on my best of list, but at the same time, it's not bad enough to be on my worst of list either. I still have the same opinions I did when I first saw it. It definitely could be a lot better. It's my least favorite movie in the Monsterverse. I honestly wish this movie was better, but you know what? With 65 years and 30 plus movies, I'm not complaining too much. So again, this is going to be my last Godzilla-related video until Godzilla vs. Kong, but now I want to hear from you guys. What did you think about the spoiler elements of this movie? And if you saw the movie more than once, what was your opinion on the second viewing? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and of course leave a comment. Don't forget to support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.